Hello and welcome to the Sephirah Centre of Shamanism. My name is Luke, experienced practitioner and mentor of the Shamanic and Occult sciences. On this channel, we break down all things relating to the ancient Shamanic and Occult technologies, bringing them into balance with the modern psychology and deep psyche. Today, we're going to be discussing the shadow self in relation to esoteric practices. This is going to be a very important video for anybody who is getting into the deeper aspects of spiritual development from the perspective of shamanism and the occult especially. We're going to be looking at the shadow from a psychological standpoint as well as an esoteric standpoint and bringing both of these together to ensure the safe and sustainable exploration of these practices from within the modern world. This is going to be a very important subject, so I definitely recommend staying tuned. So all of us have come from dark matter energy. All of us have been birthed from the depths of the abyss, from the pure feminine space, the void that is not defined by anything. This void of dark matter has birthed our multiverse into being, with the task of defining a meaning for itself through separation into avatars that have free will. We are the products of that separation. It's important to understand that our psyche mirrors the polarities in the cosmos. We have a conscious mind and we have an unconscious mind. Our conscious mind mirrors the light matter, the place of form that defines structure, limitations, logic and reason. And then we have the unconscious space, the pure feminine space that is not defined by anything. The cosmos is mostly made up of dark matter energy. The realms of the void, the realms of dark matter energy are infinite and are much, for that reason, significantly bigger than the realms of light matter. So with that in mind, our conscious mind is very much like a spotlight that is shining into the middle of the abyss. What we can see directly in front of us is only the surface level. The shadow self refers specifically to the aspects of us that we have denied, that we have pushed into our unconscious mind because they are too painful to feel. The shadow self is the deep unconscious and is something of an entity that has been shaped through the things that you have denied about yourself. This entity communicates with you via the external world. In other words, the world around you is the product of your unconscious mind. We create from the unconscious mind, much like our reality was dreamed into being from the dark matter. And because the dark matter is a mirror of our unconscious mind is what is responsible for the cultivation of our reality. So for that reason, the shadow self has birthed your reality around you into existence. So therefore, the reality around you is the avatar for your shadow. You don't tend to interact directly with your shadow self. Okay, your shadow self is always going to communicate with you through the external world. And this happens both collectively and individually. Okay, so an individual manifestation of the shadow will happen through every encounter that you go through. Okay, so especially if you have a recurring pattern where you're pulling in the same types of partners, the same types of friendships that may not be desired, or even the ones that are desired. Okay, the shadow self is going to send you the experiences that you need to own and is not limited by any ideas of duality. Many people think that the shadow self contains only the darker, more grotesque aspects of the psyche, but it also contains the lighter aspects as well. The unconscious can be interpreted as the personal hell structure. The personal hell structure is simply the hell that exists within the self that is made up of everything that we have denied about ourselves. The goal of the shadow is to get you to own these aspects of yourself so that you can then start to free the segments of your authenticity that you have neglected and encased within the trauma that you have experienced. So the shadow self is constantly reminding you of what you are neglecting. So for example, somebody who is not owning their talent, despite the fact that they may be talented in their particular area, may have people coming towards them saying, you're really amazing at what you're doing, you're really amazing at this, you're really amazing at that. Somebody who is essentially neglecting their anger and not wanting to own their anger is going to attract people into their lives that are extremely angry, okay, or exhibiting anger in quite a direct way. So the shadow is always going to communicate in those ways through the external world. It's a concept which is extremely well known and comes from Jungian psychology, but despite the fact that it is well known, it is still one of the most bypassed aspects of self-development, but is the only real effective route of self-development, may I add. This doesn't mean that there is only one way to do shadow work. Shadow work is sort of a catch-all term. Yeah, a catch-all term for a variety of different practices that involves looking at what exists within the unconscious and looking at what we have denied about ourselves. So it's important to understand that the shadow self is always going to be throwing things into your reality that you need to own about yourself. And it is the ego which stops you from initially owning that, purely because the ego is the vehicle of separation that has the role of making your reality comprehensible. If you did not have an ego, you would not be able to function within a physical body. The ego is responsible for organizing your physical experience and creating order from the chaos. So that means that the ego is going to try and keep you safe. The constraint with the ego is that it stops growing past a certain age. Yeah, so it's about the age of 7 to 10 where the ego stops growing. Okay, before that, we don't have a fully developed ego, and it's being shaped according to the experiences and the traumas that we undergo. Once the ego is fully developed, it works from the precept. So it works in a way that is trying to prevent the same trauma from happening again. Okay, the ego can be seen as a catch-all term for layers of the false self that are built to encase our truth and authenticity. So it's important to understand that the ego and the shadow are naturally opposing forces purely because the shadow is chaotic and the ego is ordered. Okay, spiritual practices should never be geared towards trying to get rid of one. Okay, a lot of the New Age is geared towards trying to get rid of the ego or trying to get rid of the shadow. Yeah, in the modern world, a lot of our societies are established specifically to avoid pain. They're established specifically to avoid unpleasant feelings and emotions and experiences that are unpleasant. But in doing so, they come up stronger both individually and collectively. So the chaos that manifests collectively in the world around us, this is going to sound very controversial, is a manifestation of the repressed collective shadow. So if our society is geared towards the avoidance of pain, okay, and neutralizing things as opposed to actually dealing with the problem, then you've got to look at how that happens on the individual level. If you ignore your shadow, yeah, and you continue to scapegoat what is outside of you, and you continue to separate yourself from that, which is what the ego is naturally wired to do, then that expression of the shadow comes up even stronger elsewhere. Yeah, so for example, if you're attracting the same type of partner, you may think that the solution is to just get rid of the partner. Yeah, I'll just get rid of the partner on the physical level. But unless you deal with the problem and look at what the mirror was in that situation, yeah, and the mirror can be indirect. Just because you see someone behaving in a certain way doesn't mean that you are behaving in that way exactly. But the mirror is always in the emotional trigger that emerges within you. Okay, so when we look at that on a deeper level, we need to understand that if we do not acknowledge the mirror in that example, yeah, then we can get rid of the partner on the physical level, but another partner that carries out the same role is just going to come up again somewhere else. Yeah, it's very normal to experience that if you are scapegoating the partner, yeah, and saying it's all this partner's fault, but then you're not doing the inner work to actually look at realistically what emotions you need to feel and harmonize in order to stop that same thing from manifesting again. Yeah, we create from the unconscious space. So that individual is going to be a manifestation of your shadow self. Okay. So we need to understand that if we keep repressing that shadow, it will come up somewhere else, individually as well as collectively. So if our society is literally built to treat and get rid of pain and neutralize pain and suppress, what's going to happen? The same thing's going to happen collectively as it does individually. Yeah, chaos will break out one way or another as a direct manifestation of the repressed shadow. Okay, so this is going to happen both individually and collectively. If we avoid our shadow individually, we're going to have the same events coming in time and time again. Yeah, that are gradually going to get stronger and stronger and stronger until we're willing to listen to it. Okay, this can become re-traumatizing if we continue to scapegoat and ignore what is happening outside of us and continue to see the problem as something which is entirely separate from us. Okay, that can be quite controversial. I'm not saying that any trauma that you've experienced is your fault. I'm not saying that you are responsible for how somebody else behaves, but like attracts like. Okay, you are going to be attracting somebody into your being that is going to be somewhat resonant with an aspect of you. They're going to represent an aspect of yourself that you are needing to own. Okay, and that can be a pleasant process. You can attract somebody in that can help you to integrate and own aspects of yourself that are lovable, that are talented, and things like that. But it can also happen in the other way as well. Going back to the example of repressed anger, if you repress anger, it's normal to attract angry people. Okay, if you're somebody who emits quite empathic qualities, it's very normal that you are going to attract somebody who may exhibit more narcissistic qualities. Sometimes it can happen in a way that is opposite because like attracts like. Yeah, so somebody who is empathic is essentially going to be emitting that more, you could say, more martyrhood based energy. And what is that going to attract? That's going to attract somebody who may be used to essentially being supported by somebody who exhibits the qualities of a martyr. So the way that that works for each individual is going to depend on what they have with repressed within their shadow. It's very important to understand that. So when it comes to the exploration of esoteric practices, particularly the deeper practices such as shamanism and the occult, it is very, very easy to continue to scapegoat when you start to interact with, say, the spirit world. Okay, so it's very normal, and I see it happen time and time again. People getting in touch with me saying I'm the way I am because of this entity. This external entity is attacking me, or this thing outside of me is responsible for me not being in my power. So when we start to explore practices that are in relation to, say, energy work, invoking spirits, journeying, astral travel, interacting directly with the realms that hold our physical experience together, it's important to understand that you are going to encounter things in the same way that you encounter people. So you are going to encounter beings, energies that are going to be direct mirrors of your shadow self. Okay, the shadow is going to communicate with you in the astral plane as well as the physical plane. Okay, for many people who don't do any esoteric practices and they don't do any journeying or any sort of spirit work, then it's going to manifest through the world around them. But often what can happen is that people can get into these powerful esoteric practices with the intention to feel better and actually use these practices to try and get rid of their feelings and emotions. Okay, so for example, I'm going to try and rise up to 5D. We're all very, very familiar with that one. I'm going to try and rise up to 5D so that I can become a light being so that I don't have to deal with my stuff. Yeah, it's something that happens so often within the love and light communities that is incredibly dangerous and incredibly hard on the body, because the shadow self represents the way back to yourself. And this is particularly present if somebody is going into deeper practices such as shamanism, especially the occult practices, especially the darker aspects of the occult. They're going into it to get rid of their emotions, but little do they know that they're interacting with technologies, energies, spirits that are very much mirroring the shadow self and are, if anything, are resonant with some of the deepest portions of the unconscious mind. So if we don't go into these practices, basically acknowledging that the spirit world, how we perceive it, is going to be a mirror of our own unconscious, is going to be a vehicle through which our shadow self interacts with us, then it's very easy to get re-traumatized by these practices. It's very easy to go into these practices and start to sort of scapegoat whatever you're experiencing, to go into these practices and, not use them for what they're actually here to do, which is to help you understand yourself better. When we are avoiding our shadow and we go into these esoteric practices, we are interacting with our shadow self head on, particularly when we get into initiation, shamanic initiation, occult initiation. You are opening portals, opening doorways within your psyche, and you are basically saying to your shadow self, I want to get to know myself and understand myself better. Okay, so as I've mentioned in previous videos, there are always going to be different reasons for wanting to get into these practices. There are always going to be different aspects of yourself that are going to have different reasons for wanting to get into these practices, and you need to be honest with yourself about them. There may be some parts of your psyche that exist within your shadow that are wanting to get into these practices to escape, and that's valid. We just have to own that. There may be some that get into these practices with the genuine intention to heal and develop, and there may be some that get into it with the intention to avoid. So the whole point of shadow work is to own our feelings and own these different aspects of ourselves so that they don't play out unconsciously. If we avoid our shadow, it is going to essentially manifest in ways that are more chaotic and potentially re-traumatizing. Okay, and one of the most common scapegoats for this is the spirit world within esoteric practices. Okay, so if you are getting into these practices, it is important to have a solid foundation whereby you are used to looking at your shadow self. Okay, otherwise you're going to be getting into these deeper practices, particularly if you're wanting to get into initiation, that is realistically going to start to drastically open doorways within yourself and shift your consciousness into a higher way of being, where you are actually going to start to feel more and feel deeper. If you're avoiding your shadow, then it can put enormous strain on your nervous system, enormous strain on your psyche, because you're literally going and you're interacting with the spirit world, interacting with these ancient technologies that are literally designed to uncover deeper aspects of your shadow, but you're going into it to avoid your shadow. So it's something which is extremely dangerous. Yeah. And people who step onto training, particularly people who step onto my training, there is quite a strong vetting process to make sure that the people that are coming through are really wanting to do the deeper work with their shadow self. Because this is realistically the only way that you are going to be able to ground these energies. Okay. It's very normal to get into these practices with the intent to feel better. Yeah, with the intent to tap into deeper feelings and emotions that, that you're wanting to tap into, such as unconditional love, beauty, all of these things. But these feelings are encased in your personal underworld. These feelings are repressed within your shadow self, and there is a residual energy that you need to cut through and own first before you can start to tap into the true power of the love and light. If we only stick to the light, if we only stick to the love and light, we are only going to be able to tap into aspects of it, purely because when we go into our shadow self, we are going into the aspects of ourselves that have learned that it is not safe to embrace the love and light. Yeah. So there's always going to be a paradox with it. The deeper you go inside of yourself, the deeper you go into your shadow self, the further out there you're going to be able to go. Yeah. The further into the light you're going to be able to go. The deeper you are willing to go into your personal hell, the deeper you are willing to go into your personal underworld, the higher into the ether you're going to be able to go. Yeah, so it's important to understand that there is a paradox there. When you embrace light, you are opening yourself up to the dark. When you embrace the darkness within yourself, you are opening yourself up to the light. Okay, the reason for that is that if I'm trying to reach for this love and light, yeah, if I'm trying to reach for these very high ether energies, I exist within a physical body and I have belief systems and patterns that I may not want to own. So those belief systems and patterns are only going to allow me to tap into aspects of that light. They're only going to allow me to tap into certain aspects of that light that I'm in resonance with. So the only way to tap into more of that light is not to have more love and light. It's to actually go into your unconscious, go into your shadow, go into your underworld and start to own the aspects of yourself that may not feel safe to embrace that love and light and that unconditional love. And then it becomes a process of toing and froing between the darkness of the light. It's not about moving to one and then neglecting the other. Yeah, it's not about staying in the light and then avoiding the dark. It's not about going to the dark and then avoiding the light. One is going to open you up to the other. So when you go into your underworld and you start looking deep into your shadow self and you are willing to allow your shadow self to look deep into you, you will start to cut through the layers of your false self that have been encasing that true love and light, and then you will learn how to embrace that love and light within your day-to-day life. Okay, so many want the love and light, but the truth is that they've actually learnt that it's not safe to embody the love and light. So when they try and stick to the light, they're only going to be able to tap into portions of that. So if you really want to taste the full power of the love and the light, you need to go into the underworld. Yeah, you need to go into the underworld and free the aspects of your inner child that have become trapped and frozen in the trauma that you have experienced, so that you can tap into deeper aspects of that love and light and essentially reparent yourself, reparent your inner child, so that they can start to feel safe within the light. People think that the shadow self only contains the darker aspects of the self. But it's a paradox. When we experience the trauma, we are having our most desired feelings fragmented, completely dissociated from our being. Okay, when we experience trauma in those early years, we are already in that natural state of self-expression. So when the trauma comes in, we detach ourselves from that desired feeling. And where does that desired feeling go? It goes into your unconscious, goes into your shadow. You dissociate from it because you've learned that it's not safe to feel that very simple feeling that is actually a desired feeling. So then what we end up doing is that we end up going into the external world and not only scapegoating the aspects of ourselves that we don't want to look at, that we find unpleasant, but actually projecting our ability to feel those very simple feelings that our child wants to feel onto the external world, much like how we do with you could say, some of the deeper, more darker aspects of the self that we may not want to look at or we may find unpleasant. Yeah, we'll scapegoat the external world with the things that we actually want to feel as well. For example, somebody could have learned in their early years that it was not safe to embrace unconditional love and that love was conditional. So then they are going to dissociate from the aspect of themselves that embodies unconditional love. That will become encased, trapped within the personal underworld, dissociated from, encased in the false self, at which point they are then going to seek that through the external world. They're going to be seeking that unconditional love or that love through the external world. For example, they may only give themselves permission to feel the unconditional love if they are in a relationship or receiving that validation from the external world. Okay, so it's important to understand that we are always going to be scapegoating by default. Yeah, until we make the decision, the conscious decision to really delve into our shadow, we're going to be stuck in that state of scapegoating both the heavier aspects of our psyche and the desired aspects of our psyche. So in order to really taste the full benefits of your spiritual evolution and your healing and evolutionary path, you need to be willing to look at the deeper parts of yourself that you have denied. You have to be willing to look into your underworld in order to free the aspects of yourself that have become trapped in the personal hell structure, trapped in the illusions that have been established due to the trauma that you've experienced. So if we continue to avoid our shadow, then we are only going to tap into so much of our potential. Not to mention, it's going to put enormous strain on our psyche and our nervous system if we are engaging in practices that are designed to make us more sensitive, designed to open us up, designed to make us feel things deeper. Then we're going to be unleashing these forces within our psyche, but then we're not going to be willing to look at them. So we're going to keep repressing until something big and potentially re-traumatizing has to manifest as an avatar for the shadow to show you that you need to break the pattern. So these big collective events only manifest because of the repressed shadow. Society is so focused on not looking within the darkness because of this old school patriarchal programming that is built towards staying in the light in order to go to heaven and not looking within the darkness at all, despite the fact that it exists within the self. So shadow work is the way back to yourself and is the way to really get the most out of any practice, particularly the deeper practices. You're going to be pushed into a place where you have to own your shadow. And this is going to happen collectively anyway. Yeah, we're in the age of Aquarius now. Things are going to start moving or already are moving at a drastic rate. So we need to start taking responsibility for the things that exist within our unconscious mind. And as I said before, this does not mean that the trauma that we have experienced is in any way our fault. But we need to start looking at the aspects of ourselves that are frozen in that trauma and start owning them, taking responsibility for them instead of scapegoating them and projecting them onto the external world because we do not want to own them. Okay. And we need to own our ego in the process as well. The ego is an important aspect of us. We wouldn't be able to function in a physical body without it. So it's not about getting rid of the ego to embrace the shadow, but it's about allowing the ego to be matured and gradually molded into the shape of the higher self. Okay. So I think this is near enough everything that I wanted to speak about today. If you have any questions about this, feel free to get in touch. My work is specifically geared towards balancing the esoteric practices with the modern psychology. So I highly recommend, if you are interested in exploring these practices in balance, my membership program is an amazing option for that. The link has been left in the description, alongside other healing and mentoring services that have also been left in the description. So thank you guys. If this video was of value to you, then I would definitely recommend a like and a subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.